So you can't talk about entrepreneurship without talking about growth. And in many ways, you obviously can't talk about scaling without geographical expansion. And so that's why today in this episode, we'll be talking specifically about expanding geographically. And I think a very awesome South African story to hear about this is from Steve Uria. Now, if you haven't heard of Steve Uria's got over 100,000 followers on Instagram because of his purpose of impacting the wellness of as many people around the world as he can. And he's the founder and creator of SWEAT1000, Switch Playground, Hit House, any of these brands that you know of and that you've trained of in terms of these boot camp style gyms. He is the founder and creator of this. And so what we're going to get into now is the story of how he started these gyms, how he scaled them, and how he grew Switch Playground from South Africa into New York, and then the trials and tribulations and problems of doing due diligence on a napkin instead of doing that properly when moving into a different continent and a different city. So this is a really truly epic story of an entrepreneur's successes, failures, learnings along the road. A couple stories in terms of a franchise business model and why that's potentially not always the right route to go, but then also a lot of real hard-hitting life lessons as an entrepreneur in terms of why we do this in the first place. So stick around. This is an episode that you're definitely going to want to listen to.
It transcended from the studio into a lifestyle, which is what you really want.
I love just straight out of the gate. You just brought up like three core traits that I think of any successful leader or entrepreneur, and that is passion, resilience, and humility.
That is what my one bit of advice to anyone who's going to expand to different markets is study your market well.
What you're trying to create now is like an identity and a community, right? And so for you to do that, it wasn't just around training there. It's like you need merch, right? You need branding
Right.
for that. And for you, it wasn't necessarily about growth. It was actually more about customer retention, if you will.
You're increasing your overheads, you're minimizing your focus, and what's the real goal? So at the end of the day, you actually did better with that one store, and now you're not that happy anymore.
Talk me through that first testing process in terms of it's like, okay, cool, yeah, we're really onto something. And then how did you get traction?
Someone said, build it and they will come. Build it, market the hell out of it, and they may come.
Welcome to The Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Cool, Steve. Welcome to the Founder Files. Obviously, we've chatted a bit, and your passion for wellness and for health and fitness is just so infectious. And I think that's a common thread between any successful entrepreneur is just their complete commitment and dedication and passion to their craft is something that's so clear. And you're such a clear example of that, and I can't wait to hear your story. But before getting into all of that, welcome. Great to have you here.
Cameron, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And I think it's so special to be able to share the story because if I can help someone minimize and mitigate the issues that I learned along the way, it could save someone a lot of school fees, a lot of time, and a lot of money. So, from my side obviously, as you said, being passionate and doing something that you love, that's truly your calling, does make everything much easier because, passion and purpose is the way I live, and expanding that and opening the channels to more human beings and getting access to more people has always been my goal. And that's pretty much what was my motivation to take this on the road, so from national to international and digital as well, so that we could break the brick and mortars and really be disruptive and see how we can expand. So again, as you said, being passionate, being all about it, 100% committed, leaning in all the way, has been my driving force. And then everything else sort of you figure out along the way.
And on that, before we get into, Steve as the entrepreneur, Steve as the business leader, Steve as the consultant, the trainer, the wellness coach, etc. There's so much to you. I want to just know a bit about Steve as the person, as the human being, right? And specifically, you're talking about this passion. Where did it come from?
Well, actually, it grew, and I'd have to say, being in my early years, I loved sport, but I loved individual sport. I wasn't a team sport guy. I loved being accountable for my own failures and successes. That's always been my thing. So I wasn't on team sports. I played golf, I played tennis. I was one of the junior golfers before it was a thing, long before Tiger Woods, obviously, and the whole coolness about golf. It was actually uncool to probably play golf, but I loved the challenge. I loved, being accountable, and that was something that I learned early. And then as I went into my later years with martial arts and the human body, I went to Randolph University and did the first intake of sports administration degree, which was the first year they offered that course. And when finishing that, I went to the military, and that is truly where I found my passion exploded, I should say, because the boundaries and limits on what humans are able to do was smashed. And I realized that there aren't any. And I know the cliche, the only boundary is you and the only obstacle is you. And it actually is, without using that as a cliche, learning how brilliant the human body is and the human mind is, and how we can adapt, pivot, overcome, and no problems, only solutions, So for me, that was probably my best education, was being in the military, and being carved down to your bare soul, really, because that's what they do to you. You go in, they carve off your hair, you all look the same in a brown uniform, you don't even have a name anymore, you've got a number, and they create these machines. And that's where you can learn, how people adapt, and leadership, the true essence of what a person's makeup is, and their abilities and their human character. So that all culminated and helped me to launch the Steve Uria became. And when you say it is multifaceted, because I look around, I know people who are brilliant personal trainers, or they're good entrepreneurs, or they're good businessmen, but for me, being well-rounded, and being able to shape shift, pivot, whether it's dealing with someone who's a junior coach or a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and being able to adapt and work with that person on an even level, really is a skill I learned along the way. And that's been very helpful for me, is to be able to learn from someone. Everybody has some knowledge we don't have, and I love to listen, chat, and learn from people, no matter who they are, where they are, on an airplane, in an airport, in a store, in an elevator. I'm the guy in the lift, everyone's standing there, and they're awkward, and I'm going, how's everyone today? And they're like, oh, yeah, this guy is, but it breaks the ice, and you never know, what it could lead to. So I love probing, humankind on a psychological, physical, mental, emotional level. That's just who I am.
And I love, just straight out of the gate, you just brought up like three core traits that I think of any successful leader or entrepreneur, and that is passion, resilience, and humility. So I think, again, just knowing Steve at the core is knowing what it means to be kind of a successful person, a successful man at their core, in terms of knowing who they are and, bringing your purpose into the world. So thank you again for doing that on the Founder Files. But now to get into the chronological part of your story, right? You've obviously introduced, you were at RAU, now known as the University of Johannesburg. You joined the military, and that's where essentially you were really shaped and crafted, right? And I know a lot of your I'd say entrepreneurial journey in terms of growth and businesses and things like that really kicked off into the US. And as we were chatting before this, I mean, you moved over to LA in '92. So just tell me about the brief gap between, going from the military, then going to LA, and why.
Yeah, so basically, when I finished the military, before I wanted to really settle into something and grow roots and ground myself, I had friends who had immigrated to LA, and I never had the intention of immigrating at the time, but I was curious and I wanted to go spend some time. I was, again, fascinated. LA was sort of the ground zero of fitness and bodybuilding at the time, and I was very into it back then. And I went to LA to visit some friends, and basically ended up staying there for 4 years. And when I was there, I had the opportunity to work with John Park, who is the son of Reg Park, who was my mentor when I first started lifting weights. And he was Arnold's mentor, and I was very lucky to have him. He was a Mr. Universe in the 50s and a pioneer in bodybuilding. In fact, Arnold speaks of him often in his documentaries, if you've seen it on Netflix, or have you read the Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. He refers to Reg a lot. So Reg's son, John, and I had, it was John's gym called World Private Exercise, with the first world gym private training facility in West LA. I had the opportunity to work with him. And from that, I was also on the side doing my own personal training. I've got an old Ford Bronco, and I've got all these benches and dumbbells, and I drive around LA from home to home. I ended up actually linking with some seriously good clients. I had a couple who were psychiatrists for, what's his name now? I've gone blank for a second, from the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson. So they were his psychiatrists at the time. So I ended up training Brian Wilson, who was the main writer and main Beach Boy, and very interesting guy. I trained him, and I pivoted to Stan Winston from Stan Winston Special Effects Studios in California. He did Jurassic Park and all Arnold's movies. He was the special effects maestro. So I was actually on the set of Jurassic Park, the first one, before CGI and all these computer images. The guys had to wear those dinosaur suits. I had to train them. They were like 80 pounds in that kitchen scene in Jurassic Park. I don't know if you remember that. So I had to train those guys. Very exciting. I was young. I was 22. It was an amazing time for me to really learn who I was. And I still remember my pivotal moment when I was training the two psychiatrists I was talking about. So it was 5 a.m. across the valley in LA. Get to the house. It's pitch dark. Unpack the gym from up this flight of stairs, benches, dumbbells. It took me like 20 minutes. The worst part is they had these 2 little dogs that would bite my ankles the whole time. They really didn't like me. And it was then I was training them, and I was subjected to listening to the Beach Boys on their CDs. They played the same Beach Boys album over and over, and it was almost torturous at the time because it was always the same. But I remember being on one knee helping the wife doing squats or lunges or something, and I said to myself, I'm going to be the best personal trainer in the world. And I'm 22, and it was at this dark moment, really, because you're really like on the floor, dogs attached to my ankle. You know, I'm exhausted. It's 5 a.m. But something happened to me that day, and it was like, I'm going to be the best personal trainer in the world. And I kind of, you know, and you spoke about humility. I would never look at myself as anything other than doing my life's mission and helping people be better. But I committed to myself that day, and from there, literally, you know, after the Northridge earthquake, I ended up moving to Atlanta, Georgia, and this was where I became a business person. So I decided I wanted to have a personal training gym. It was still very new in Atlanta. It wasn't quite as cutting edge as California. But what I wanted to do was really start small and grow organically. And I bought a house, and my wife, now she wasn't my wife at the time, she was my fiance, and I bought a house with a basement, and I turned the whole basement into a commercial gym. I actually took my funds and built out this gym in my home and started training people, and just organically grew this thing from you know, me, and then I'd had one trainer, and by the time, you know, my first child was, my wife was pregnant with our first child, I had, I think, 8 trainers in my house from 6 a.m. all day. My wife was like, okay, it's over, it's time to go. And yeah, so I looked around, I bought a commercial building, an office building, which I got an SBA loan, a government-backed loan, which was amazing. And I had the top designers, builders that did everything, architect, build, you know, one-stop shop guys who did only high-end residential design and build this gym. It was magnificent. 2-story, not massive, but obviously way bigger than what I had in my basement. And that was called Eclipse One-on-One. In fact, that gym is still going today. And that started in 2004. I sold it, and then they resold it years later. So I sold in 2009. And they resold it 3 years ago, and it's still going. And that's just a testament to a great brand that we built. I ended up with about 15 trainers, but the model was people paid the business and I paid commissions or percentages to trainers based on various criteria, professional history, is it their own clients they brought, or how long they've been with me. And that model was phenomenal. There was lines out the door. I had every Fortune 500 CEO coming in there. And I'm talking like, if I had the net worth of the first 4 hours of my day, 1% of it or 2% of it, I promise you I'd still be flying around on private jets. It was like, I'm talking about like Coca-Cola. We're talking about Cox Communications. We're talking about like really significant companies, because Atlanta was the home to many of the Fortune 500 corporate head offices. And all these coaches and trainers there was lines out the door. It was insane. But the moral of that story is I built it organically from small and grew into it each time. And we'll talk about that later when we get to the New York episode, because kind of forgot about that model and just went in hard and learned big lessons. But that was a huge success. And from there expanded into training NFL players and then other sports, NBA, Charles Barkley. I had some really great people, some icons of humans coming through there. And I saw like a demand for like people in summer wanting to go outside. So I went to a park up the road and said, my military background, I want to try to do an outdoor workout. We'll call it a boot camp. And I went to Army surplus store. I got a drill sergeant kit and made T-shirts, Eclipse boot camp. And I took 7 of my good clients. We went out to the park at 5:30 in the morning, started doing it. Second day, police arrived. They thought I was starting a sort of a militant group, which I wasn't. But I had a whistle and I was screaming and running on heels and rolling in mud. And these people loved it. What I realized is people are actually fascinated by military training. They love the idea, but no one could commit to going. So they always have this like, I wonder what it would be like if I went. And I realized from a psychological standpoint, this wasn't just about a physical workout. People wanted that. They wanted to be rolling in the mud and doing push-ups in the mud like the soldiers do. And it just blew up. But it really blew up because I worked with Sanjay Gupta, who was the medical correspondent on CNN. And I did wellness every Sunday with him. And I said to him, come out and check what I'm doing. And he came with a camera crew. And we did it. And it went, that was the best business model by far, actually, I've ever had. I had 50 to 100 people paying me $20 a day and no overhead. I was in a park. It was just like cash. It was unbelievable. Ended up hiring a lot of ex-military or current military people to expand it to multiple parks around Atlanta. And that's where the boot camp method was actually born. It was an amazing product. And you know what? I've actually always been quite disruptive and forward thinking, just innately. It wasn't really something I'm like, okay, what's next? It just came to me sort of, wow, that was great. The kickboxing, then I opened a kickboxing studio only for fitness, no fighters. So I didn't allow fighters in there. This was for civilians and housewives. And what happened is the NFL guys, for the pro football players, would come and do the class. Then the ladies all joined and the chemistry was insane. And that became such a huge success. It was like the first cardio sort of kickboxing, boxing workout. That was another one I created. And then it evolved to Blast 900, which was the predecessor or precursor to SWEAT1000, which is the concept I brought back home. And that was a treadmill-based workout, which I opened. I had 5 stores across Atlanta in all the sort of different areas. And I sold that. And then we decided to come back to South Africa with our kids. We had 3 kids just for 6 months. And then we'd already gone to Newport Beach, California, and found a school and looked at homes. And we were going to come back for 6 months and move. And we came back and nobody wanted to leave. So ended up staying in Cape Town. Not a bad choice. Kids settled in. I knew some guys who owned a gym, and they said, well, why don't you train some clients? I did. And then they said, what about your concept? We've got those treadmills. They were very exclusive treadmills that went to a 30% incline, a company called Free Motion. The 2 brothers had the agency for that. And I said, well, that's what I used in the US. So yeah, why don't we do it? You've got an open aerobic room. Let's check it out. We called it SWEAT1000, which stood for Specialized Weight Endurance Aerobic Training. and the 1,000 signified the amount of calories that you could burn in a class. And so, but prior to actually starting in that room, I tested it in the main gym with like 4 ladies, and everyone got fascinated by it, and it just grew and grew. And we started the one in Cape Town, and then it was such a success that we thought Joburg's a no-brainer. And we hunted high and low and found an amazing location in Morningside, in the Morningside shopping center. It was a hardware shop. It was a dead center. The center was built with all the restaurants. Yeah.
Can I actually jump in, Steve, now? Because now
Absolutely.
the whole theme now is now talking about geographical expansion, right? And so this is the first
Okay.
time where a lot of what you were speaking about, obviously in the States, and talking about Atlanta, is part of that model that you had with the first boot campers moving into the different parks within the same city.
Yes. Yes.
Is obviously the one side of it, and getting the right people and the desire to do that. But now we're speaking about coming back to South Africa, and that was obviously going to be one of my questions in terms of like why. But I can see I've loved the story so far, because you've given so much emphasis in terms of like where did this DNA come from that's come into the businesses that you've really scaled into the future now. And I do definitely want to come back later in terms of now once we've understood all the business models, why the Eclipse one was you said that was the best.
Right.
So I imagine there's so much in that story now when you essentially, it's like, yeah, we did in Cape Town, tested it with 4 people, turned out it was a success. Okay, we moved to Joburg. It's like, I'm sure that there's a lot more that happened in between
Oh,
there.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Of course.
so let's just unpack some of this detail, because obviously this boot camp method that you came up with in Atlanta and realized it worked, bring it into an internal gym environment, bringing in a cardio element as well, to make it really an intense workout with the boot camp style. How did you, so just talk me through that first testing process in terms of, it's like, okay, cool, yeah, we're really onto something. And then how did you get traction?
With the boot camp we're talking about.
Well, with SWEAT1000 at first.
Okay, so SWEAT1000 at first was, yeah, so it was in a commercial gym. So the cardio room was on one side, and then there was the open aerobic room, sort of where you did aerobics, on the other side. So what I would do, because of the way SWEAT1000 works, you do a period of time on the treadmill, and then you do stuff on the floor. So I'd literally try and reserve 4 treadmills for my people who were doing it. Then when we got off the treadmills and ran to the aerobic room, and I'd set up like BOSU balls and do the HIIT stuff in there for the 10 minutes, come back to the cardio, kick people off the treadmills who are now working out in the gym. It was not ideal, but we saw it worked, and the people who were watching it were like, this looks really cool. How do I join? And then it became like we couldn't accommodate. When I say I was running it, I couldn't accommodate more people because I had 4 treadmills. I can only do that. And I can't, what we usually do in Sweat to capitalize is have as many treadmills as you can in the room, because that dictates how many people you're going to have. Because if you've got 15 on the floor, treadmills, you can have 15 on the floor, which means a 30 capacity, because you swap back and forth between the floor and the treadmill. But then people didn't want to do the treadmill. They just wanted to call double floor. So they'd do the floor twice and redo the series again. But I did see I knew from Blast 900, and that was a big chance I took in Atlanta, because my kickboxing classes were such a huge success that when I shut them down to move to the Blast 900 treadmill-based class, people were irate with me. They were really pissed off. They loved that boxing class.
Well, it's when you've got product market fit, eh?
That's exactly right. And you know what? But I'm one who evolves. I said, trust the process. Trust the process. Come and try this. And then they did, and they were like, wow. And what I did is I obviously, what made me better than what the other running sort of concepts were, is that every day at like a Barry's boot camp, there would be decks on the floor with dumbbells and the treadmill. And that was it every day. And they would do lower body, upper body, arms. I did total body every day, but what I did is I changed the apparatus on the floor every single time, because I learned that changing constantly, people not knowing what they're going to get, and that always challenging the body firstly makes it respond better. If you do the same thing every day, the body doesn't adapt. It just gets used to it and you don't change. So always challenging the body. This was from personal training and studying human movement. I know that shocking the body is what gets results. So I knew that every day someone would walk in and they'd run to the window and look in the class and see, oh, he's hung boxing bags, so we're doing boxing and treadmill. And they'd be all excited, or some wouldn't. Some would hate it and say, I wanted weights. And then but then you're pushing people to do stuff that they don't choose to do, which also works. So again, the whole psychology and the training behind the method was also so pertinent in this sort of concept, which then became Switch, which I'll talk about later. But I
Yeah,
saw
I
the
could see
desire.
immediately in everything that you're talking about there is like that's the DNA of Switch that was being
Yes,
born before you
correct.
even knew Switch, came up with Switch in the first place.
Yeah, I always knew, like, and just to maybe talk about it now real quick, is when I had SWEAT1000, the barrier to entry was it was treadmill. Some people hate running, and no
Mm.
matter what you do, there's a treadmill, even if they walk. So I said, how can I get a little bit of everything? I always wanted more, and that's where Switch came from, which I'll get back to later. But with the SWEAT1000, when I saw the demand, I said, yeah, let's go for it. I've tested it. I can see the desires there. So let's get 9 of these treadmills. At the time, I think they were probably 40,000 Rand a piece. So it was quite a commitment. So we got all the treadmills. We got the floor equipment. I designed the logo. I wanted something really cool, which it was. It had a very big, cool element to it. And we launched it. We had a great launch party. We did everything right. Big cocktail event, and we made super cool clothing that people would become part of that community, and they would want to wear it out because you were cool if you were part of that. That was the mindset, and I'd seen that in the US, is that when people love a brand, I mean, look what people walk around, they pay 4,000 Rand for a Louis Vuitton shirt. And in essence, all you're doing is marketing someone else's company. I mean,
Exactly.
think about it. You've got this huge LV on your chest, and I'm paying you 4,000 Rand to market your company. It's unbelievable if you think about it,
Uh-huh.
or Adidas or Nike. I'm paying you to market your brand. I mean, how did that happen? Because
Yeah.
if I could get people to pay me to wear my brand out, I'm doing something right, because that means they're proud to be attached to that community. And that's what happened. And we would bring in merchandise, and we actually, because of my American ties, my wife did all the merch. She was brilliant. We would get alternative apparel hoodies, and they would land here and be selling for and this is in 2011, remember, 750 to 900 Rand for a hoodie. And you could go to Mr. Price and get a hoodie for 90 Rand or 110 Rand. But this said SWEAT1000. The fabric was super cool, burnout sort of, you don't get it here, fleece. And we drop it. And the interesting thing I'll tell you now, between different, understanding different locations, different cities, we'd have the drop and people would love it. It would fly. But just to elaborate on what I was saying now, while I've got this point in my mind, Morningside, Sandton, Sea Point, Cape Town, SWEAT1000, same communities, same people. When I say same people, loving the same concept. We would drop we'd drop our new merch. The hoodies would come, Cape Town, people look at it, pick it up, feel it, put it back, think about it. Morningside, Sandton, they take one in each color and then throw it on their black card and be done. Not even a question. There was no, that's the difference that one needs to learn about different markets. And that's a very pertinent point is,
And yeah, I wanted to get exactly, sorry to interrupt again, but I think that's
yeah,
it's such an epic story, and part of it is in terms of when you started bringing merch in, because a lot of people would think linearly in this way, in terms of like, okay, well, we're gonna launch we've tested the business in terms of the core business model, which is a bit of a new approach towards having a gym in terms of class-based style, only class-based,
right,
treadmill as well. So in that is immediately you're also excluding people that don't like running, but in principle, but those people would still join anyway. And immediately what you're trying to create now is like an identity and a community, right? And so for you to do that, it wasn't just around training there, it's like you need merch, right? You need
right.
branding for that. And for you, it wasn't necessarily about growth. It was actually more about customer retention, if you will. If I have to bring like some strategy language to this, it's
Yeah.
about the fact that it's like, that when people started, how can I make sure that they come back, besides thinking that this is cool, is the fact that they need to start identifying with this. And what's the best way for them to identify with this is if they start wearing the clothing and start signaling that. And that's the best way for you to pick out is like, who are my like core customers and who aren't?
Mm,
Who are going to be the fly-by-nights, right? And who are the people that are
right.
going to come every single week, right? And it's basically
It's
the
that
best indicator of that
stickiness.
is
Yeah.
who's buying the merch or not. And so for you, putting in the merchandise in the beginning, is a huge way to identify it's like who your core customers, who aren't, who's essentially going to be part of this community that we're building with. And that was the point. It wasn't about bringing in a new revenue stream necessarily. It was around
Right.
making it as sticky as possible.
Correct. And it was an extra revenue stream. It was insane. I mean, Barry's Bootcamp in the US, their juice bar, they call the fuel bar, generates as much as their classes do. And what they do is when you walk in, you pre-order, and online when you sign up for the class, you can pre-order your smoothie, and it's sitting on the bar with your name on it when you come out. And they actually figured out that that was such a massive additional stream of revenue for them. And you're always trying to capitalize on your captive audience, offering them the best experience. Obviously, for me, I was driven by making sure that that experience was the best they'll ever have, and that created the stickiness we were talking about. Wanting to be part of that community and to be attached to that community was also a huge part of it. At points, and even at SWEAT1000. So just to go back, when we were going to open Morningside, people said it's never going to work. This concept, like you spoke of boutique earlier, it's just a class. I can go to Virgin, I pay 250 Rand a month, and I can have all the classes and a swimming pool and a steam room. I was like, okay, but you're not going to have what we're offering you. And the live DJs and all the experiential components that were so powerful that people were blown away. I remember walking to open at 4:45 in the morning, the Morningside store. Someone said, it's not going to work. I said, let's see. And we did take a chance because it wasn't a proven thing yet. This was first, to market of this kind of workout opportunity, and very disruptive. But, we opened the doors, and I just remember, it's like Joburg so different again. At 5:45, the class started. At 5:30, then the doors opened to the studio. All these women, and I say women because it was so many women, would run in and throw their bags on to reserve the treadmill because they wanted to start first on the treadmill, then go to the floor. So it was always who's there first. The funniest thing is everyone had the same Louis Vuitton bag hanging on the treadmill. I don't know how they knew which treadmill was theirs. It was always that brown, classic monogram LV on every treadmill because it's Morningside. And if you don't walk in at 5:45 as the coach and start at 5:45, they're standing on the treadmills like this looking at you. And Cape Town, 5:45 class starts, people arrive at 5:50, and they stroll in, and it's like, that is what my one bit of advice to anyone who's going to expand to different markets is study your market well, study your demographic, because people are so different in different places. It's insane how different it is. Like, as I said,
and that's the same country, right? Two different cities. And I think obviously anyone who is obviously South African knows that people in Cape Town, people in Joburg are different breeds, right?
But spending power and mentality, absolutely.
And what I'm so fascinated by is like, and this is the first thing, is like the thought around expanding from, Cape Town to Joburg was just like, it seems like the thought was just like, cool, we've got it here. Like Joburg, like obviously like knowing the fast-paced energy of Joburg. I'm making assumptions here and you can correct me. Please do correct me. But obviously the fast-paced energy of Joburg versus the fast-paced intensity of what you've got as a gym is like, this is definitely going to work there. Let's just find a spot and let's do it. And it'll be bigger than it is in Cape Town. Let's do more treadmills and let's go and let's repeat the exact same model and the exact same customer experience that we have there. And that's all the assumptions that you made. And obviously you had these lessons in terms of understanding the demographic of people that were there in terms of their own like experience and demands of the business. Like that's the perfect example of the 5:45 versus the 5:50 in terms of wanting to start and like booking these treadmills. So what were those tell me about those assumptions that you made and where like reality like almost kicked you in the teeth in terms of this is not the same customer segment.
So, well, I mean, it actually worked out positively, because if we'd conversely done it Joburg to Cape Town, there would have been a huge lesson. It's like everyone wants it in Cape Town, just like my Gold's Gym in Sandton. Everyone's like, you need to open this in Cape Town. No, believe me, it wouldn't work the same. I know this for a fact. It's just is what it is. That lesson was in New York later that you're talking about for me, where you were like, we had the switch with like 70 to 80 people in the packed classes in Cape Town. We're doing 110 people in New York. We need huge spaces. No, not quite. It's someone said, build it and they will come. build it, market the hell out of it, and they may come. There's a lot of that was my lesson, is like, I thought we had such a strong brand, and I know it is a strong brand now, especially after the New York part of it, but bringing it to New York, and without wanting to jump too far ahead, it was a lot of lessons. You think you're going to open, we had all the merch, and we had all the Switch merch in New York, and after the first weekend, I said, how much did we sell? And someone said, none. Yeah. And the reason is no one knew what it was. No one wanted to advertise it. It wasn't cool yet. But we'll get to that later. The thing that I wanted to mention is, like, so we opened Morningside out of the gate. That was the best store we ever had. It was just the cash cow. It was printing money. It was out of control. And then we thought, people came to us and wanted to open, and we went the franchise route, which is something that I will never do again. I said it, but I did it with Switch for a while. But
you've told me that a couple of times. Sorry, Steve, but I
yes.
really want to get into that. But I'm just conscious if we're going to go down another part of the story. But it's again just the fact that it's like we opened up and straight out the gate it was successful. I'm like, I want to know why. So obviously you made this educated guess, went out there, you said market the hell out of it. And you had these people coming in. I just want to understand a little bit about this journey and just some of the adaptations, right? So obviously it's like, obviously going in Cape Town, going to Joburg, and it's like it was more successful there. But there was naturally some adaptations, and that might be maybe small in the grander scheme of the stories that you're having. But I just want to get into the topic here because, this is essentially the birthplace of really cutting your teeth in terms of being able to expand and being able to adapt to different markets whilst being consistent amongst them as well. So do you mind if we just go into a little bit more detail about that growth into Morningside, how that started, and just some of the adaptations you had to make in the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So why I say it was just out of the gate, I think that the brand awareness from people coming to Cape Town on vacation, doing the class, and then going, but there's nothing like this in Joburg. And we built on social media quite a strong presence with the cool factor of the SWEAT1000 in Cape Town and the community. And then we would do runs together. And it transcended from the studio into a lifestyle, which is what you really want, is a brand that becomes a lifestyle is a sure thing, and that was something that I think the demand was there before. It was already, they were waiting for it. It was like, imagine when Krispy Kreme or Starbucks came to South Africa, or Burger King. Remember, it was an anomaly. I'm not comparing us to them, but
no, sure. South but there were queues on opening day.
Space, opening day it was sold out. Opening weekend it was sold out. So what we did is we did free classes for the first weekend for everybody, which obviously everyone loves free shit, So it was already, if we had charged, we would have been fine. But we did this whole free weekend blowout so people could come experience it. There was such a buzz. And why I said earlier, this Morningside Center was poorly designed. Nothing worked in the space we were in. Nothing. And when we negotiated so we could make it financially viable for us to do, we spoke to the landlords and said, everybody in the center we had found out was on rev share with the center. I said, so give us a break. 3 months in, look at what the general increase around our store is with the stores in your center, and then let's discuss a set rent, which we did, and everyone was flying because this essentially became a heartbeat for the center. It was so busy from 6 a.m. Every class was sold out all day, and everyone then went to the restaurants, to the stores, the Pick and Pay. Every store's business just started to fly because here comes all these people. They walk out of a class on the biggest high, the barber shop, the hair salons. I mean, I watched our clients in every single store. And that was a very smart move in negotiating and I used that in all my other businesses. I was like, we are going to generate feet in your center that you haven't had. We are basically going to be a heartbeat because you are turning over 60 people an hour. There's 60 going in, 60 going out, 60 waiting, coming early, going to shops. And that was a big selling point for us with landlords and for negotiating, which I learned, which helped me with all the places from then on. But then that center, so talking about the learning curve, when I was going to say about franchise, and it was going to be a home run, because look what Morningside did. it doesn't work that way. We then went to Four Ways or one of those locations, and we opened, and the opening weekend, of course, was insane. And then it was like 5 people in a class, 7 people in a class, 4. So
Sure. And
now
this
we
is
got
the
to sit
different
back
suburb,
and
in the same city.
different suburb, same city. Like, what is different here? And how is this? And that's why I was saying franchising for me, because then the franchisee is always looking at the franchisor going, you're not helping me. What's going on? It's your fault. So you're giving away 80% of your business and you're still doing 70% of the work to try and keep it going. I mean, we had to focus so hard on the 3 franchise stores that it actually diluted our energy in our local stores, which is another conversation altogether, but part of growth, which is, what we're talking about. And how do you ensure that that same system, that same method, you've got the same treadmills, same setup, how come it's different? Pretoria was another completely different market for us. We opened there, beautiful store in a great mall, and it just was, something wasn't working. It just wasn't the same. So how can this be so different? Yeah, I'd come to a store because I was like the creator and they'd sell it out because they'd market it and suddenly I was there, but it can't work based on one individual. This has to be scalable without that guy. It's like Paul Mitchell hair salon. You want Paul Mitchell to cut your hair in the beginning, but then you'll have one of his people he's trained because they're in his method. So that was the key for us, is learning how to detract from Steve Uria teaching the class and how everybody can then do that, which has happened. Switch in Santa now is full all the time. I'm not there much at all because they finally got the method and they're delivering my message the way I wanted it delivered. And that's the hardest thing.
And that's the biggest thing, is because you can't have brand and culture are the same thing, just on different sides of the coin, really. And that's the problem, where it's like you can have the visual IP of the brand, in terms you can have the merch, you can have the logo, you can have all of that, but if you don't have the culture, I think that's one of the biggest challenges of a franchise model, is that if you've got this brand that you're franchising, you got to really think about how is it that you're going to make this culture consistent amongst this, because without that, again, you can be in these different markets, but it's around, like, I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges that you had, and I'm making this assumption, I really want to get into it, is the fact that because the culture was different in all of these different franchises.
That was different. And also remember, we're selling a service, not a product. And that's where you're different. You're in the service industry. There's a certain expectation of delivery. A Starbucks or a McDonald's, there's the recipe. Is what it is. Anyone who's trained basically can cook that and create that off a little blueprint. But when you're selling energy and you're going into a class to teach and drive 60 people at 6 a.m, you got to bring it with everything you got, and you got to deliver my message the way I do. That's what I used to try and instill in my coaches. I said, if I see you here for a paycheck, I don't want you here. I want you here because you're passionate and you want to change your life. Your mission is my mission. We wake up with the same idea every day, and that's to do the work we're here for, and that's to make people feel brilliant. I used to say it at my one-on-one gym, if you leave here and you don't feel better than when you came in, I'm not charging you for the workout. And honestly, I never refunded one person. And that's the truth. That's the kind of energy I wanted, to create. And that's my secret sauce, is that 100% passion and drive and obsession with being the best at what you do. Every single time. I used to explain to people, as I would to anybody, to us, it's a customer or it's another person, or I've got a client at 3, I've got a client at 4. Those are people who've chosen you, who've trusted you, who've invested in you to help them. And no matter what the customer is or whoever it is, one must never take for granted someone who's believing in you and spending time and money on you, because they could be anywhere else. So when they come to you, they're not your 3, 4, 5, 6. They're a human being who's elected to be with you and trust in you. And that's the thing that I used to try and teach. And I think every single person, and especially I could tell you every employee in retail in the United States, needs this lesson, because their service is shocking in 90% of the places you walk in. You'll walk into Bergdorf Goodman. I mean, that's the top retail stores in New York. they're almost doing you a favor by helping you, and it doesn't send a good message, you know. And that's, if I don't feel I'm on my A game, I'm not going to show up. I'll rather put someone else there. And that's, I believe, what will help, especially what I've learned in selling a service and a product to people rather than a product. Because, you know, a Louis Vuitton bag is what it is. You know, you go and you don't really care. I mean, I'll give you a cappuccino or whatever and make the experience great. It's luxury. But in the end of the day, I'm coming there to get this bag so that everyone thinks I'm awesome because I'm, you know, in Louis Vuitton. I'm selling a workout. I want you to feel that, every bit of it. So I believe that in some of the locations, coaches let us down. And when you're trusting in someone, you don't want to micromanage, because I'm hiring you because I believe in you. I want you to do it, and I don't want to micromanage you. I want you to carry my messaging. Same, you know, in any business, you want that person. You've invested your life into that business. So someone needs to have your back. They can't just come in there and sort of, you know, half-assed do their job. They've got to do it the same way you do it in order to keep the integrity of your brand. And that is the difficult part in scaling on nationally, locally, internationally. It doesn't matter how you do it. It's how do I ensure that my messaging, what my belief is, my ethos, my mission statement is going to be carried the right way. And that is why I say sometimes expansion can be the biggest killer of success by far, because as you grow and you have to be micromanaging every area of it, you can't focus on your core business because you're busy putting out fires all the time. And that's something I learned when I first took Switch Playground to New York. I sold a 50% interest in my stores in South Africa so that someone would have blood in the game and equity, and they would carry my messaging because it's their messaging now. But as I was distracted and I had to be all in New York, I had to pull out of South Africa. Sort of, my hand was on the pulse, but it wasn't involved because I couldn't. There's no way. New York was. I needed 4 of me there, you know, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But slowly, my partner here started to try and change things and make it his way and change the brand. And you know, unfortunately, in this business, ego is huge in any fitness sort of thing. It is what it is until you get older and realize it's only going to be your worst enemy if you harness ego in a negative way. But here's a perfect business that works. It doesn't need to change because it works. So why are you trying to change it? And I would wake up every morning in New York and have messages from my wife and Kelly, who was my right-hand man, that my partner was doing this and that. I just couldn't do it anymore. It was killing me because I'm trying to build New York and I can't be fighting fires in South Africa. So in the end, I actually sold my interest in South Africa, which is another whole story. And 4 months later, the person who bought me out gave me my shares back, kept the money, obviously, said, keep it, have your shares back. You're the person that needs to be involved, not the other guy. And he was gone. He bought him out. So sure. It's just, I guess the moral of what I'm trying to say now is it's very, very difficult to, you know, you springboard from one to another. From, you know, nationally, it's one thing. Internationally, especially into a market like New York, where you are, I mean, that's 24/7. You have to focus on that. And especially when you go there the wrong way, which we can also get into. I'm sure you want to talk about that in depth. But yeah, that's just to that point about growth and quality control and integrity of a brand. It's all exciting. I mean, it's great. You know, you want to have New York, London, Paris on your, you know, underneath your name, but it's much easier said than done.
Let's pause here for a moment. If you've made it this far into the episode, it's probably because we're talking about things that you're trying to implement in your business. You found your sweet spot in the market, you've gained momentum, and you've already been through a phase of growth. Because of this, you know that on the outside, growth is super sexy, but on the inside, it's incredibly difficult to achieve and to sustain. So now I've got a question for you. Now that you know the sacrifices it takes to achieve growth, how much time are you currently spending thinking about your direction and your next phase of growth? I bet not as much as you'd like, because you're still in the thick of it. Leading, deciding, pushing for performance, pursuing new opportunities, maybe even thinking about selling the business. See, your story is yours. But this chapter where growth meets complexity, this is when things get hard. Because you can listen to insights from podcasts and stories from people that have been there before, but applying it to your context is a completely different ballgame. So let me help you. If you want to have a 90-minute, no strings attached conversation with me, then head over to Metavolve's website in the description of this podcast below, and let me help you navigate this next phase of growth. Because at the end of the day, building a great business is complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Yeah, 100%. And I just want to go a couple steps back to that SWEAT 1000 points in terms of like, hey, it's success in Morningside. Let's grow into more suburbs in Johannesburg. And to your point there is that, you know, for you is like what I'm reading between the lines in terms of some of the assumptions that you made is the fact that we've got two routes to this, right? So we can either have this within the same company and the same leadership structure, but that now I need other leaders that are employees. And the concern is that it's like, and leaders and managers, and I'm very concerned about being able to maintain the same level of culture, because I know that it's like, because you're an entrepreneur, you know that entrepreneurs kind of make things work because they've got, as you put, blood and sweat in the game. They've got skin in the game. And that was the belief there in terms of, so I like it's this trade-off between either we can keep this all internal in terms of this growth, but then we've got to change something really drastically internally in terms of how we manage these things and how we have leadership structures and management structures, because you know your time is now completely limited, right? It's like you can only handle the two of them to a certain degree. And so the thought was like, okay, well, if we want someone who's going to believe in the same ethos and send the same message, it's got to be another entrepreneur. So we've got to franchise this. They can take the brand. I'm going to be very selective in terms of the kind of coach and person that's going to be wanting to do this. And, you know, they're going to be able to take it and run. And I think it's like, and just speaking ahead and what we've spoken about this is like, and I'm just nervous to almost say this, but I think you would acknowledge that that was maybe one of your biggest mistakes in the process is that you like, instead of franchising is like, actually, we should have gone through this internal scaling journey and obviously maybe like invested internally into a management team and maintaining the culture instead of going that route.
I think a better route would have been finding someone who's young, excited, and they want to build this and offering sweat equity into it. And when we say sweat, there's two. You could have the phantom equity, which they speak about, where you say, okay, we're going to start at 3%. As you make strides, we take it up this X% exponentially as we hit certain milestones. But if you leave the company, you don't get the shares, which is the golden handcuff, which I've learned about in New York, which is quite a good method of working with people who don't have the means to open their own, but want to and have the passion. I would have rather done that because,
yes,
but at the same time, remember, so when you open a store and it's like, let's talk Morningside, for example, it's doing 600,000 Rand a month. Unbelievable, like ridiculous. That was the kind of cash that was doing in 2012. It was off the charts. And now you think, okay, so let's go to Four Ways and do it again. So now let's think about really, so what do we want? What is our goal? Are we going to want another store doing 600,000? Because now what we're doing is doubling our overhead. We're taking away our focus off the one store because we now have to be divided by two. We have other employees and other headaches. We've got other costs and expenses. So you're increasing your overheads. You're minimizing your focus. And what's the real goal? So at the end of the day, you actually did better with that one store doing 600, with probably 400 profit, as now you've gone and opened this other store that's draining your 400 profits to keep it going because there's a burn, because it's not doing what you thought it would do. And now you're not that happy anymore. And you're trying to figure out what's the point of the expansion. So I think people should have a very clear idea of what is your goal. Is this something you want to scale out to 20 stores? That's your goal, and then sell the entity to a Virgin Active? Or is that sort of a plan you may have? Or to, like in New York, in the US, obviously you would want to scale it out, and then one of the big guys will come and buy your VC groups. And then there's like groups now that have like exponentials buying all the boutique gyms that are successful, and they're a publicly traded company. And then they go into the umbrella of companies, and guys are killing it. That was a great way to do it. But we don't really have that in South Africa. So my idea was maybe we grow these, and Virgin Active or Planet, which Planet actually did show a very big interest in Switch at the time. Gross all these stores and then sell it, but then one should keep the stores and not franchise, because now you've got franchisees you've got to deal with. So in essence, the franchise model was a quick way to expand without our equity and making a little bit of equity on the front end. But it was actually the worst idea in the world. So I think if I ever did an expansion, a license model would probably be a better model, because there's way less regulation. Also, there's an upfront fee and a standard monthly fee. You're not auditing, you're not worrying about this. You, like CrossFit did, they charged a very low entry, but they made their money because every single coach had to be trained through the CrossFit method, and coaches, you needed at least 10 a store. So they were just printing money on that and the merch, and they weren't really that interested on the front end of what they're going to charge to set it up. It was a standard fee and then monthly $1,000 a store, which is not a huge amount, but it was done. You have 20 stores, you're getting 20,000, plus every single coach, all the merch has to come from you through the licensing. Much easier than franchise, where you've got your manual and your, I mean, like the legal side of the franchise model is insane. I mean, it was a great learning for me, because, you know, for an entrepreneur, it's a great way to scale fast and without your equity, and getting a little bit of upfront. That was really what was exciting at the time. It's like, this guy's going to pay a 200,000 Rand franchise fee. We just get that straight away. Yeah. And it was cool, because it was like, well, this is a great model, and I'm going to have 100 grand, you know, like just like that, just for being my business. But then that 100 grand was it was a big teaser that wasn't worth the 100 grand. If it was a lot more than that, it might have been interesting, but it didn't equate to what we thought it would. And the management, like I said, you give away 80% of the business and you end up doing 80% of the work still. That's 100%. The truth, you know, especially in a small franchise group.
And so what I'm again hearing from underneath it is that the source of this, the issue in terms of why you went franchise in the first place, because you mentioned like what's your goal in doing this, what's your goal in expansion. I think that's obviously, it's so obvious to say it out loud, but nobody thinks of that, because they've just got their assumptions. It sounds like your goal in terms of like you almost became a victim of your own success, right? It's like, it's working. We're making so much money. It's unbelievable. Let's just do something as like, so we can just make more money, because we know that that's going to be the case. And I think that immediately signals to me is like, when your goal becomes about making more money, things are going to go wrong, right? Because essentially
1,000,000%.
Because
you lose
the
focus.
point, you lose focus on terms of why you're doing this in the first place and how you meant to make this sustainable. And I think that was the Achilles heel.
Correct. 1,000,000%. It was like you get caught up in this like success, because everyone said it wasn't going to work, and suddenly it's working so well. I'd literally go to Morningside every 2 weeks, and we had a drop safe, and I was stuffing a tog bag with cash, because Joburg were paying cash. It was unbelievable. Obviously, we had people stealing as well, but the cash in that safe was just, I literally flew home on the plane with 100,000 Rand cash every second week. It was, I felt like, I don't know, like a narco, you know, it was like, who is this guy? Like literally a tog bag full of money. And it felt great. And suddenly I got caught in that, like, well, if this store is doing that, this can do that, and this can do that. But the sad part is that was the lesson I should have learned, but I didn't, because I did the same thing with Switch. And I promised I'd never franchise again. I did. And I also, when we were so busy in Cape Town, I mean, also became an anomaly that it was like, because I sold SWEAT1000, everyone's like, what's Steve Uria going to do next? And I sat back and I created this new product, which was going to be Switch, where, as we said earlier, let me look at all my learnings. Okay, so if you hate something, you're only on it for 2 minutes in Switch. So if you're on a treadmill for 2 minutes, who cares? Not 30 minutes. And how can I offer all the variables of exercise? And if something new comes out, I can just pop it onto the playground. So now there's the whole,
because you're not also restricted with space as well, because you're not having to dedicate 15 treadmills to this.
And that's how I expanded so fast in the one, you know, when I say expanded fast, when I taught a class in New York on a Monday night at 6:30, there were 110 people in the room.
Sure.
And it was, you know, the original.
But with the Sweat model, you could have maybe only done 60.
No, you were limited by your treadmills.
Yeah.
So you were limited. You also had a barrier to entry, being that it was a treadmill. Sometimes we used to throw spin bikes in for people who wanted to do a bike, but that took away from what's the actual concept. It was a running concept. It's still going today, which I really am proud of, because the program really is good, and people who love the treadmill love SWEAT1000. It's a great concept. When I left, we had 8 stores when I sold it, 8 across South Africa. Now there's 2, and one's on life support. Sure. Unfortunately, it's
sad and crazy how much that happens, eh?
Yeah.
The moment you pull the entrepreneur out, it just tanks.
Well, I think just because the value system and the purpose behind the passion changes. And I think that people feel that, people really do feel that. So I was very fortunate to find the family that are running, the Switch in Joburg now, and the Golds that are my partners, because their passion is infectious as well. And they do an amazing job. And one of my very good friends, Sam, who's like the head coach and runs the whole show in Joburg, is like a female Steve. She's just all in, and just there's no end to her energy, and that's what people are drawn to.
I've been trained by her. I know I've met her once. Okay, I've been trained by her once, and I will never forget her.
Yeah. So it's not that they want to be you, but they want to, like, how can I have more of that? Yes. How can I be like that? Not be them, but like, how do you do it? That's what actually led me to this position I'm in now as a chief health officer. Is the CEO had done my classes, and he saw my energy, and he saw how it helped his whole business that used to come to Switch every morning, and how much more productive they were from that. So he's like, I want that energy in my business. And when I had the time and we spoke, he said, well, how about, partnering with me, and let's create this chief health officer position where you bring your energy to my business to get that heartbeat going. And that's what I've been doing now for 9 months, which has been amazing. Very obviously different pivot, and don't want to get too far off point, but the truth is, it's the energy that the entrepreneur has that's infectious, and that has to infect your brand and everyone in it. And that's the truth, So, when we went to New York, just to get to expansion, my partner who was coming in with this is a wild man. He's a cowboy. He's seriously, like, goes all in. He throws the dice, bets on red or black, and go, and I said to him, he was expanding his fashion business to New York, and I said, let's take Switch there. And he said, cool. And we sat down, and he said, how many people do you get across? What do you charge? And on a napkin, a serviette at a Vida, he wrote down numbers, and he said, cool, let's go. We need to get a flagship store. If you've got 80 people in Cape Town, we'll do 100 in New York. And that was like how the first flagship store was found. That was in East Village in New York. And, at the time, I actually trained another client who had very good friends in the nightclub business in New York. And he said, these guys love your brand. They want to buy in and be partners as well. And my other partner said, no, I want to do this. And we actually spoke this weekend about how hard New York was. And I said, remember when we said we should have had local people involved who knew the landscape and had already sort of roots in New York? He said, yeah. He said, I fucked up. I said, yeah, you did. It took probably 3 years of the 4 years we were alive there. Could have been short-circuited by that, because, in retrospect, we can look back. But what I'm saying is the due diligence for New York was done on a napkin at a Vida. So that being said, do your due diligence properly. Yes. Which, my tenacity and grit and never, give up from my military days attitude is what kept Switch alive in New York. Obviously also the funding the burn, but from a psychological and emotional standpoint, what I watched happen there was, it truly took every bit of, like, when I think back to my boot camp days, when you really at someone standing on your head, literally with a boot in the mud at 3 a.m. and making you roll around and sing like a bird. And, that sort of survival mechanism is what kept me alive in New York, to go through that. When they say, if you make it there, you'll make it anywhere. I truly, again, a cliche, but not, because there's truth in that. I mean, everything about that place you needed to know. Simple thing. All our water bottles in a black trash bag, put it outside the studio with all the other trash to be collected. that makes sense, right? They'll collect the trash and your stuff's gone. Come back the next morning and your water bottles are lying all over the street with your branding on them, and the bags have been torn open. Why? Because the mob run the trash collection. Unless you pay, personally, they're not going to pick it up. So we got fined for littering, and we didn't know that. So these are like, I'm talking about little things that make a difference. So everything in New York's a payoff. Everyone's involved underhandedly in something. I found out my general manager got the laundry service for the towels, kickbacks, the water bottles, kickbacks. He was busy making all these deals, and they were quite expensive. And about 15% of what we were paying, they were paying back to him under the table.
Sure.
And this is a guy who was my
like
general manager.
This is America. You'd think that this sounds like this is an African thing.
This is New York.
Yeah.
I found Atlanta was again same country, but
completely different
so
culture.
different on every level. I mean, you talk about different. The taxes are different in every state. There.
Yeah,
so
sure.
we open in New York, but we registered in New Jersey because the taxes are different if your head office is based in New Jersey. So this is something we were advised to. That was the one good bit of information we got, is we registered in New Jersey because our taxes were probably about a 3% difference, and New Jersey's over there.
Yeah, 100%.
We're over here in New Jersey, and the tax bracket's different.
It's like the difference between like being in Gauteng and registering a business in Northwest Province.
Exactly, or your car, whatever it is. It's just those details. So where our first mistake was when these guys wanted to partner with us, and I can clearly say that because a week before we opened an exercise concept called Rumble opened.
Yeah. I'm going to jump in here because I can see you getting so into this, but like I want to go 999 steps back to SWEAT1000, right?
Let's go.
Yeah, I want because there's so I still want to go through the detail of the Switch story, and you're getting into some of the meat, but I obviously just want to contextualize it so that we can really get the lessons. But let's just go back to Sweat, right? When did you decide to sell, and why?
So with SWEAT1000, I actually had an opportunity. There was a client who wanted to bring it to New York. And I flew to New York, looked at the locations, came back. My partners are brothers at the time. And what was going to happen is we were going to set up the SWEAT1000 in New York, but the guy who was going to do it wanted me to have a bigger share in. I mean, I created this. This was my baby. But when I came to South Africa, I partnered with these guys 50-50, me 50, them 50, 25 each. And when it came down to the New Yorker guys said, listen, Steve's the one who's moving. He's the risk. He needs to be happy. You guys are sitting in Fresno, not really participating, but understand you're going to be involved, but I want him to have the bigger share, and they wouldn't do it. And then it just went south from there. It just got uglier and uglier. Unfortunately, that commercial matter got personal by them, and it went to litigation. And in the end, I said, it makes sense. Let me buy you out, and I'll take the sweat. You've got your gym and your other business, which is commercial gym equipment. I said, let me just take my business and go. No, because it became so popular in the IT workout, they didn't want anything to do with my franchise. These were jumping up and down because they knew I was the person they wanted in this business. But it just became unplayable. And in the end, for me, my peace of mind, and I had this other thing anyway formulating in my head with Switch. It was just, I'll go and recreate myself. I've done it before. I've moved countries. I can do this. I know me. So I thought, let me get a decent amount of payout and let's do it. And then they tried to, they went really personal. It got pretty deep. Went to litigation. I had 3 advocates pro bono working with me because I know them well. Anyway, it got settled. They bought me out, and that was the end of me and SWEAT1000, which is upsetting because had we stayed the path, that could have been an international brand because it was so powerful at the time, and the timing was right. It was 3 years before Switch actually went to New York, and that's when the boutique fitness bubble was at its prime in New York, which was the hub of boutique fitness. So in retrospect, everybody got hurt by that stupidity. Everybody. I mean, honestly.
And that's so hectic again. And it just brings back to the point of where there's such a almost balancing act that one needs to be as an entrepreneur with a business, because at the end of the day, it needs to be profitable, right? And at the end of the day, you want to be materially successful. I mean, like that's part of it. But the again, just the biggest problem there was almost like the same thing as the franchisee thing, but now it's at a like shareholder level scale. And it's just the greed of like, I was like, I want to be able to make as much money as possible. And like one of the sayings I like is, would you rather have a slice of the watermelon or the whole grape? And it's like,
Yeah.
and it becomes kind of obvious when you put it in that perspective, but having that kind of desire of control, it's like, I want to be able to make as like, I don't want to like this perception of equity in terms of is like I must try and hold on to it as much as possible. If that starts getting in the way of the business being able to achieve its scalability, then you're getting in the way of the business.
And at the end of the day, to be honest, equity only really counts if you're so successful that you get big distributions, which isn't often the case because you're
Yeah,
always reinvesting, especially if you're growing, or if there's a major event like a big buyout. And at that stage, if you've done really well, 5% of something's better than 100% of nothing. To the same analogy is sort of what you said. And people don't see that. It's like, oh, and 50% of what? I owned 50% of Switch New York. What did it mean? Absolutely nothing at the end of the day.
yeah,
Truly. I mean, if we sold it for $10 million, $20 million, it was amazing. But it's not often that that happens. So I think being fixated on how much equity you have rather than looking on the journey to getting to where you're trying to go and doing well out of that and having a comfortable life and making decent salary or money or whatever the case is as you build your brand. I don't think that, if you're going in something with the sort of, unless your goal is to build and sell, exit fast. If you have an exit strategy that's within a 3-year time frame, then fight for your equity. If you really believe that's what's going to happen, but you're going to put 3 years of your life. And one thing I've learned, and one thing I tell everybody is, money is great. It comes and goes. All the things come and go. The only thing you'll never get back is time. And when you're investing your time into building something, you're never getting that back, ever.
100%. And then you sell it and watch someone else make a success of it or someone collapse it, and then how are you going to feel when that happens?
I've seen both. And to be honest, I've got to the point where I can divorce that part of my life. So I did like in the beginning, I was so hurt with this whole SWEAT1000. When I saw the logo, I actually like turned away. If I saw people I knew still going there, I was like, how the fuck could they do that to me? But I now look back and say, what a powerful brand. I created this in 2008 in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's still going.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to what a great brand it is, because unfortunately it grew. And then obviously when I left, it dropped, but it's still going and people still love that workout. So the product's amazing. But if you're not enjoying the ride, then it's pointless, the journey. So for me, it's like, would I like to own fast food chains if I knew at the end of the day it's going to make me a lot of money? I don't believe it's not my truth. It's not who I am. And I can't condone doing that. So for me, I'm a purist and I'm true to myself. And I think that has helped me so much, because it's, again, going back to that infectious feeling. People want to know how can we emulate that? How come Steve doesn't eat carbs or drink alcohol? And that's just being true to yourself as a visionary or an entrepreneur. For me, it's like I live my truth. And I think that you can't teach experience and you can't fake your truth. So for me, when I tell people, if you're living your truth, you'll be successful. I believe that if you have a 1,000,000% commitment, you have a decent product, but you're in your authentic self, in your power, you can't fail, because people feel it and they want to be part of it. And that's something I believe, because I wasn't a business person. I'm not a spreadsheet guy. I'm not that, like, as you can hear, I'm like when I've sat in these meetings and they're talking percentages and this and the burns that, and we need to, like that. I've learned it because I've had to, but I don't waste my time diluting my brilliance in my other areas by trying to do that. And I spoke to you about this before. And I think as an entrepreneur, that's one of the biggest lessons, especially when you're expanding, is whatever you're brilliant at, you find people who are equally brilliant in the other areas to make the team brilliant. And that's what works. Is like, I found a business advisor who could run that side of it as brilliantly as I run my side of it. And then how can you fail? It's like, I'm not going to, I could sit there and do business plans, but it would eat hours of my day that someone else could do in an hour. And I've now lost hours of my day creating brilliant things, you know. So it's important to know what your strengths are, but it's more important to know your weaknesses as an entrepreneur and to find people to do that for you, so you don't because that, you know, again, time is of the essence with everything. And that's why I say, if we did SWEAT1000 at that time, that would have been a global brand. No question about it. The world was primed for it then. By the time Switch hit, not just because of COVID, that boutique bubble was about to burst anyway. It was so top heavy, you know. But yet we still climbed to you know, the top 4 boutique workouts in New York within 4 years of hell. But that was just based on true grit and, you know, never die attitude.
Yeah. So I want to know now how you got there. And it's like, and thank you for being so, you mentioned the word authentic. Thank you for being so authentic and real in your story. I think that's what's, we need more of that. And that's a huge reason why I have the founder files in the first place, is because, you know, entrepreneurship and success and seeing all the numbers, it like looks great, but you know, going into litigation with your business partners is probably one of the most soul-destroying experiences you could ever go through. And one thing I didn't know or realize, and what's so sad, is the fact that, but obviously it's a blessing in disguise. It's like, you know, the whole thing, one door closes, another door opens. But the entire birth of Switch Playground wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for, you know, this the problem that you had with your partners within SWEAT1000. And again, it just speaks to you as the entrepreneur in terms of that adaptability and resilience and your own ethos and passion. You know what to do, and that DNA that continued. So I think just on that note, it's like, so now SWEAT1000's over, you've been bought out, and essentially what you've done now is like you've had Switch probably, as you said, kind of like cooking in the back of your head in terms of what to do now. You've taken the capital from that buyout, and now you've decided to start Switch in South Africa.
Yeah. So yeah, going through the trauma, again, speaking about that, you know, it's easy to lie down and play victim. That everyone can do that. It's easy to look at why that happened to me. I've never been that person. I always fall forward. So I look back at the lessons, and I said to myself, I became quite an avid hot yoga flow guy after that, just for grounding. And Switch was born in multiple yoga classes, or fine-tuned. The seed was planted when I had Sweat. And like you said, yes, I would have been in that business and continued in that business. Potentially down the line, Switch would have happened. But while I was at Sweat, you know, my focus was there. But yeah, going through that trauma took a lot for me to get on the yoga mat and actually come to terms with me as a human, reconcile everything that had happened. And basically, as I went through all these hot yoga classes day in and day out, I basically formulated the program and the method while I was going through. In fact, I implemented yoga into parts of the Switch Playground because of that, because of the grounding. And every class that I taught started with a grounding session of a 5-minute yoga style flow workout, just to get everyone present in the room, which still goes on today, which is actually an amazing way to be. And you know, and I teach people now within the businesses I'm in about breath work and meditation and yoga type of training to help de-stress and be present and actually create brilliance. Because when you are in that state of peace and harmony, and you're accountable to only yourself, you can really focus on things you want to manifest. And manifestation, to me, some people poo-poo it and think it's you know, shenanigans or whatever, charlatan type stuff. It's very powerful. It's very real. You know, the putting out in the world what you really want, it's very powerful. And instead of living in a negative space like I could have after that whole incident happened, I actually turned it into a positive. And I said, right, so that door's closed. Let's go. Let's do this. I'm now even more motivated than I ever was to have something better than what that was. And that is where that switch method came from. And really, it was an interesting journey. We you know, my wife's always been by my side. Kelly, who was with me at Sweat, joined me in creating the switch method. So I came up with it. Obviously, I couldn't really test it because you needed a playground, you know, with all this equipment and everything. So in my mind, it was done. Part of it I took from the old circuit we used to do at the Virgin gyms, where there were the 3 green lights and the red one. I don't know if you ever experienced that. You're doing exercise, and when the red light went, you went to the next one. So it was like a circuit. So I had these lights made, did this whole thing, found the location, built it out, ended up having to air freight my stuff in because it was taking too long. The cost was exorbitant. Once it got there, we couldn't fit it in the stairwells at the location. We had to have cranes come in, take out the windows, double framed windows on the second floor, and hoist equipment through. I mean, talk about troubleshooting and not expecting, whatever you think can go wrong will go wrong. It does. So always be prepared for that, and always keep a runway for that, because it's going to happen. What happened is we were building out the playground, the first one, and it was meant to be completed, say, the 3rd of January or 5th of January, whatever. Never happened. So we were getting ready to launch. Then the next one was meant to be, okay, they're going to hand over a fully built studio on the Wednesday. We're launching on the Saturday morning. So we got 3 days to trial it. Never happened. Friday night at like 11, we were still building out. We'd already now committed to a full weekend of like 7 free classes, sold out. People were waiting. Steve Uria's new thing. We got to go. It's amazing. Anyway, finally on Friday night at like 9, we do a test class according to what's in here and what I've created. And
literally like less than 12 hours before launch. Your first test is 12 hours before launch, and it's an internal test as well.
Internal, this concept's never been done. Put on the lights, go, I teach, DJs playing, fucking disaster. Nothing like what was in my mind, not a thing. Now it's 10 o'clock on a Friday night. I go with Kelly, we go sit in the office and we start brainstorming. I said to her, right, we're not using the lights, we're going to do it this way. You teach the class, I want to do it because I want to feel it, and let's go. And up until about 3 years into Switch, that's the only Switch class I ever did. I never did another one. But she taught that class. It was cool. It worked. And that's where Switch was born in 2 hours, literally, as far as, the theory was there, but in practicality, 2 hours. And the next morning at 6 o'clock, we launched. And people were out the door. It was, talk about trust and belief, right?
That's exactly what was blowing my mind there, is because you taking your vision and you're like, this is not working. Who's the person that's my right hand? How are we going to make this work? I'm entrusting you with it, and then that's kicks off. That's amazing. Exactly. I've literally got goosebumps.
That's why I say, when you hire and trust and believe in someone, let them be that. Let them be that, because you did believe in them to bring them in. So I said to her at the time, I said, what did you find wrong with that? And we worked out that it actually went down to those lights on the top, throwing us off. So, it was because you do 2 minutes on each station, and it's broken up into 30-second intervals. So for 30 seconds, you're doing something, then another 30 seconds, you do something, then you either go back to the first 30 or you do a minute of. So there's so many moving parts. I've stood in Switch class and going, what the fuck have I created, when I was like in New York and there's 100 people, there's 50 stations doing different shit around the room. And I stood there sometimes in disbelief, but it worked. It was like organized chaos. But I said, what is wrong? And we figured it out. And I said, okay, teach, you do it, I'm doing it. And we did it. And then obviously, as we went in time, things changed and shifted and improved. But the concept had to grow. It's like, I guess, when Apple puts out a phone, there's those glitches in the first, when it's actually in the marketplace, shit goes wrong. And then they do fixes and upgrades. And that's what Switch was. It was like, here's this new thing. On paper, it's brilliant. It's easy. It works. It should be fluid. But in essence, it didn't. And I didn't go, oh my God, cancel tomorrow. We're not ready. So let's go. And we made it happen. Again, as you said, believing in someone who's by your side, letting her take the reins. And the next day, and they came, and again, merch was out, pre-sold the method. People absolutely loved it. And Switch Cape Town, again, was like the best store by far, way better than New York. But that goes to say I was known. I was a known. It was like saying, Again, Michelin chef's opening a new restaurant and sold out. You know who he is. When I went to New York and opened, no one had any idea who I was or what Switch was. Nobody, nobody. And that's how we opened there and thought we'd shoot the lights out. Didn't happen, you know.
Yeah.
So in saying you need to know your area and have people on the ground who are involved and know the landscape. What I was saying earlier about this Rumble concept, they were Catch Group. Catch is the big restaurant chain in New York and LA, very hip. All the top people go there. They opened the Rumble concept, which is a boxing concept, but they used their mailing lists, contacts. They were sold out from day one because that was the hip workout. And that opened a week before us in New York. Our workout, far better, 1,000,000% better. But this just goes to show how marketing and brand loyalty and your mailing lists are so powerful compared to like being authentic and brilliant. You know, like you could, it's a testament. So
just because your product's better doesn't mean that you're going to have a better business.
No, not at all. And that was my biggest, well, when I say my biggest, it was one of them. And then my partner at the time didn't sign one lease, signed 2 leases. We now had 2 flagship stores, one in Soho, one is in East Village, both of which the rent was 40,000 a month each, just to start with. The build-outs were about 1.8 million each to start with. Think about that burn. Think about trying to recoup that by selling workouts.
So I just want to go back. Why New York in the first place, right? It's like you're successful in South Africa. Like you lived in the US. You came back here, loving being here. Why? Why'd you go back? And not even back to LA or Atlanta, where you knew you had models that worked. New York.
So truthfully, if I took Switch to Atlanta, it would have been a no-brainer. I would have shot the lights out. I always had this desire to do something in New York. I don't know. I still can't answer that question. I don't know what my driving force was. I think being part of that landscape for me was the challenge. I love a challenge. And I thought, like people said, why would you go to New York? It's the most competitive boutique space in the world. And again, it came down to my belief in myself and my product.
Because you wanted to be the best personal trainer in the world. And that's the ultimate arena.
That's the stage. But maybe deep down, subconsciously, that was it. But for me, it was, I know that this is where most people in the world want to do these kind of workouts. So I want to share my passion and my product with everyone. So I didn't go there looking as competition. I wanted to be part of the machine. And that's what I used to say to people. It's not competition. I know that on every block, there's 2 boutique workouts all day. I mean, you could, so one of the aggregators there is called ClassPass. They're a booking platform. And you, instead of signing up at Switch and Sweat and Eclipse, you go to ClassPass, you pay them $199 a month, and you get credits at all the different gyms. And you can try all the different gyms on their credits. So it's a discounted rate. It's like empty seats on a plane. So they discount. So they'll come to us as Switch and say, you've got 10 seats open in your class at 6 in the morning. I'll fill them for you, but we're only going to pay you 20% of your 30% of what you usually get. Of course, it's a great way of free marketing to fill it. There were probably 250 choices on ClassPass in New York every day. That's how many things go on there. And I went and I said, no, I want to be part of this community. I invited trainers from all the other disciplines to our Barry's and Rumble and you name it. And on a Friday, I used to have a community class where I'd invite them as our competition to do the class, and they loved it. And then it started a whole community where we'd all go to each other's concepts and actually share in the offering. So I started a whole, we're the same community, guys. Every day we wake up, our mission is to make people better. We're not competition. We help each other. If they come to us twice a week and you twice a week, it's brilliant. They won't burn out. They'll carry on. They'll love all the offerings. Let's not look at it as like, oh my God, you're spending your money at them. Why not us? It doesn't work that way. It's no one wants to do the same thing all the time.
Yes.
It'll actually probably help us sustain in the long run because they'll experience all the different things, but you're still going to be in that equation, as opposed to they do you for a month every day and then they're like, oh, I'm done. I'm burnt out. I can't do Switch anymore. I need something new. And that actually worked. It was quite a cool vibe because for me, it wasn't competition. It was part of the bigger picture.
And sorry, just on that, if I could just make a comment, because what you've highlighted so well there is that You know, people talk about disruptors and visionaries and innovators, and like, and the only thing, in my opinion, that makes them stand out to any other entrepreneurs think either about only think about their market, while a visionary innovator or disruptor thinks about the industry. And that's a clear example in terms of where you went there. And it's not just market and competition, it's like the industry. And the industry we hear works different in terms of there's class pass. Everyone is on a level playing field. It's about like what we're trying to do and like how good of an experience that you can give. And like we're all trying to do the same thing. If we make the industry better, we all win, right? And I
Correct.
and pioneering that is again you're playing the bigger game. And if you step out of playing the small game and play the bigger game, not only do you create more to eat for everyone else, you yourself become more successful in the process.
I think you become more successful and you become a role model. I think because you're so confident that your brand can stand with their brands, that people are like kind of like, wow, what does he know that I don't? Or like, how does this work? I would go with some of our clients to other, like to Barry's. Let's go do a running class together. Let's go do this. Let's go to yoga. Let's go to, because I'm such a believer in human movement and how different disciplines can actually help us all. You know, I love, again, it comes down to one word, and that's authentic. And I
Yes.
think, again, living your truth has been my biggest key to success in what I do, even in the dark times. I walked through Soho with tears in my eyes. I can't even tell you how many times on the journey. You know, big gym guy, whatever. I don't give a fuck. I was hurting. I was going through hell. I mean, I'd have my music. I'm listening to like Pavarotti, and you know, people in New York don't give a shit. Often you'd see people crying. That was quite common, actually, just bawling their eyes out walking around New York. That's when you know you're a true New Yorker. But I would literally just be pacing, questioning. I know this product. I know how good it is. Why are there only 10 people in the class? And then on the flip side, I also learned to appreciate. And when I say that is when I used to come to my 6:30 p.m. class on a Monday night, I had the most beautiful who's who people in New York in that class. It was known that was the class to go to. 6:30 on a Monday night. Between 80 and 110 people, 13 coaches on the floor, DJ, even disruptive enough. We had live musicians in the room, which made it to the New York Post newspaper. We had a saxophone and a percussionist. It was on all the news. It was everywhere. So I would then come in on a Monday night, and there'd be 80 booked, and we'd set up, and 70 would arrive, and I'd be pissed off. I was like, why are there only 70? And I'd walk upstairs, and there's like on 6th Avenue down the road, there's lines of people coming to my thing. South African dude in New York who wasn't even known 2 years ago. But you know what my biggest problem was? I didn't revel in the moment. I didn't love. My lesson was, oh, you're not appreciating this. We're going to take it away from you. Because when, in hindsight, COVID closed everything down, and I came back here and I would go and teach classes in Santa. Now there's 40 people in the room, or 30. And I stood there and I think to myself, I had 80 New York's finest literally coming in, and I didn't have gratitude.
Yeah,
And that
it
in
wasn't
itself,
enough.
it wasn't enough. And how much is enough? It goes back to the same conversation earlier. How many stores do you want? What's your goal? How much money do you want? Like, you can sleep in one bed and you can drive one car. And the bottom line is, have a clear idea of what defines not success, but your goal. What is my
Yes.
goal? I'm opening this business. I need to know in my own head very clearly, when do I think it's enough? And I can conclude that on saying, when I had a partner who had the world in South Africa, and I'm talking like everything, like flying, billions and properties and cars, and then expanded to America and failed. But before that expansion, my question was, you've got the whole world. What do you want? And the answer was, I want this in dollars. So at the end of the day, you know, be grateful and appreciate the journey and what you have, because it could go. Like, I mean, the fact that I used to stand on that stage when people were streaming into that class, and I'm talking streaming, like there was nowhere to stand. But like, the beauty of Switch again was that you could just create a station. Oh, you're going to do burpees and jumping jacks on the spot. That's a station. I mean, you'd have to walk sideways through people in that room. I mean, so a lot of people would complain, it's too packed, can't move, it's not safe, yet everyone flocked. But I'm telling you, like Victoria's Secret models, and not that that's what defines life. I'm not talking from a shallow point of view, but I'm talking like at that time, I should have looked around the room and said, fucking hell, bro, look what you've done. Look at what you've created. And I didn't.
Yeah, and you don't know what you've got till it's gone, eh?
Absolutely. And then when COVID hit and everything was locked down, I'd walk into those stores to go train myself. And it was like, I'd think back like the energy that was in that room just a month ago. All these human beings just with, and they'd take trains and cars and, getting around New York from where they are, it's hectic.
Yeah.
And my appreciation should have been up here. And I wanted more. And it's weird because, that lesson for me now is like, that manifestation, that content, that gratitude. I learned a lot of lessons, but,
Yeah.
Gratitude's a huge one, for sure. And absolutely enjoy the ride. That's all I can tell you. Don't look at what you don't have. Look at what you do have, as opposed to helping you to be grateful for the moment you are in. Because like you said, no one saw COVID coming, and it took a lot of people out. Me being one of them. When I say took it, it was another lesson. But finally, we've made it in New York. We've turned profitable February 2020, profitable, and got contracts on the desk for huge expansion signed by us. March 2020, done. You know what I mean? It's like 4 years of proper grit, proper like dig deep, like question your world grit. And then you finally make it and then it gets taken away. And that's quite a severe lesson. But at the same time, I can turn around and say we did it. We did it because of the belief. And also with gratitude to my partner for funding the burn, because 2 years in, he could have turned around and said, fuck this, I'm done, but he saw there was that potential,
And I think I love what you mentioned there about gratitude, because I think what also became clear to me is that if you become more obsessed with what you're trying to achieve than why you're doing it in the first place and who you're doing it for, you immediately lose sight of the journey. And I think that's where it's like, because for you it was, and I think again it came off the back of, like, you used to being a success in South Africa in terms of the gyms that you had there, and it was 4 years, and it's all I want is to get back to the level that I was there in terms of, and once you got there, it was now, and this is the almost addictive but very problematic nature of just having achievements after achievements and that being your drive, because you get there and immediately what's the next thing? Okay, now like we're here, now we got to grow, now we got to get there, and you end up missing the entire point.
And it's funny because I know innately as a human, that's always been my thing. I've always pointed at other people saying, how much is enough? Like, you've got the Porsche, now you want the Ferrari. You got the Ferrari, now you want the Bentley. You got the Bentley, now you want the Rolls Royce. It's like saying, your home would be someone's dream, and you're looking at the bigger home. There's that little cartoon, I'm sure you've seen it. Like, but I believe there's a positive in that, because having that burning desire is a great motivator and a great driving force. But never lose sight of who you are, and never lose that gratitude, because again, I think that taking account of where you are at this point in your life, if everybody just stop right now and say, let me look what I've got, and as opposed to what I might not have had, is a great way to live. Then, like, let me look at like that guy there on Instagram who's got all this, it's all bullshit, at the bottom line is that guy's feeling your pain on another level, so living your truth, and that's what you're saying is true. I almost lost sight of my truth by forgetting the purpose and looking at the power.
And that's what just clicked for me, is the fact that a lot of people talk about like success and money being addictive. And I think it's not addictive, it's seductive. And the problem there is, because it's seductive, it pulls you off track of your truth. And the thing is, it's important, and you like you said, you need that drive. Especially when the chips are down and you're down as well, and you need to get back up. You need that drive as well. But don't be seduced by it, right? Let it drive you, but don't be seduced.
And within the New York landscape, that success is just over here. And that success is so massive because that springboard, and that was the thing. It's like, if you are in New York, it's amazing how people were to me, oh my God, you had a business in New York. Wow. Like, it's just a business in another city. You know, honestly, it's a tough city, but it's another city. But just that, I think just the attachment to like such a powerful place and such a huge energy. People are like, just like the military, like everyone wanted to do the military training but couldn't commit to it. Same thing when you say, oh, New York, it's like big bright lights, big city. Like, how could you, tell me about it. How did you do it? How did you have a business in New York? You must be fucking awesome. It's,
Maybe a little
it
bit, but it's
sounds
damn hard
better.
work.
It sounds so much better than it is. It was, listen, it was fun, and it was huge. It was, I mean, you got the celebs and you got all these people coming in. At the end of the day, they're just people. I've always said my definition of success for me is always how many lives I've changed for the better. That's been my goal. It's like, I look around and I look at the coaches I've coached to have their own businesses that coach other people, and they've also become coaches. So the outreach is absolutely huge. I'm talking hundreds of thousands of lives, not thousands, hundreds of thousands. So I should sit back in essence and say, you know, as far as what my goal of success is, I'm sort of Elon Musk in that, because I have done that. Didn't go so well in meetings with investors or potential VCs when I used to say I'm not driven by money. I used to get kicked under the table. But I have had that definition forever. I know I'm doing on this planet what I was supposed to do. I'm so grateful for that, and I've had that platform, and potentially that's why when you asked about New York, that was for me another reason. It's like from there it goes everywhere, and then you know we started the digital thing, so it was even more outreach, so people could watch in Tokyo and Dubai. We used to stream all over the world. So I'm 1,000,000% successful as far as my definition of what I wanted as success. In a bank account, makes life easier and gives you the ability to travel and do things and have certain luxuries. But it's an energy that comes and goes. You know, it's cash is great, but you know, one day you can be flying, the next day you can be nowhere. So have a very clear idea of that goal, and don't make it about money, because you know then you might as well just go to a casino and sit there all day and bet, because you know it's the reason you're doing what you're doing is what the entrepreneur is. Something made you start that business. You had an idea, it made you excited, you believe in it, you're going for it. You know, stay true to it. And that's the truth, is always maybe write down on your notes on your phone, this is why I'm doing this, and look back at it every couple of months just to stay clear, you know, because I did get, as you said and clearly point out now, there was a part of me that got caught up in how much more can I have? And that possibly led me to be miserable at the time when I should have been celebrating the victories, you know?
I want to unplug my mic and drop it because that was epic. Steve, thank you so much for your story. Thank you for being so authentic and real as you are. Thank you for the insights. Thank you for getting personal. Thank you for getting philosophical. I think at the end of the day, that's what it is to be an entrepreneur. Is it's such a personal journey, and it's obviously such a challenging one, but it's also such a fulfilling one. And to hear your stories have been amazing. So thank you very much for being on the Founder Files. It's been epic to hear your story. But before you go, I've just got one more question for you, and that's, what's the one question that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you'd like to answer now?
Well, what's next?
There we go. What's next?
So very excited. The pivot's been towards wellness, a lot of wellness products, natural pharmaceuticals. How can I make the impact bigger, and how can I do more than just exercise? So as you know, I'm a chief health officer as a part of, you know, half day at a fintech company here in South Africa, spreading the love in a corporate, creating a model for how that could shape other corporates, because I believe it's huge. Also looking at something in the hospitality business with retreats. It's more wellness in different ways is what it's. I will always be who I am. My mission's always been to make people better in their skin, and whatever it takes. But the journey and the pivots are what's so exciting to me, because I can stay within my truth and my power, but just shape it a different way. So shape shifting, but staying true is more of what you can expect from me in the future.
Epic. Love to hear it, Steve. And if and in terms of what's next, and living this truth, living this purpose, and adapting and pivoting as you go, like the entrepreneur that you are, if someone wanted to follow that journey, or potentially contact you about to support that journey, where could they go?
So my website, steveuria.com, is active, and there's links on there, or Instagram, Steve Uria. I'm active on that all the time, and LinkedIn under Steve Uria. So those are sort of the platforms that I live on, and always happy to chat, always happy to help. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. It's an amazing podcast. I think you guys are awesome in helping people learn the right way without going through the errors themselves. It's a beautiful thing. So keep shining, and true gratitude for having me on the show.
Thank you so much, Steve, and right back at you. I'm so grateful to have spoken to you and interviewed you. Can't wait to follow the journey.
Thank you, and I look forward to watching yours.
Cheers. What an amazingly powerful story, and just so much gratitude to Steve for being on the podcast and sharing it, because a lot of what came from that is, again, just what we unpacked towards the end and afterwards in the conversation, is just this reminder of why we do this in the first place, and being very clear in terms of your goals and how you want to expand, because there's many different ways to go about doing things, and how you define the goal, whether it's conscious or subconscious, is going to directly impact the routes in the way that you go. And speak less abstractly is, that's the prime examples around the franchise business model in the first place was Sweat, in terms of if money was the leading factor, it's going to take you down a very different path towards trying to scale impact or scale value. Knowing what your goals are obviously super important. Then underneath that is just remembering why you're doing this in the first place, because as an entrepreneur, the seductiveness of success, and almost the desire to achieve and to get more and do more and be more, can make you lose track in terms of why you're doing this in the first place and why this is super meaningful to you. And the consequence of that, and this is what was so profound in the lessons that were shared by Steve, is the fact that you lose sight of the journey, you lose that gratitude. And I think that's, every time I've spoken to a successful entrepreneur, it's always about the fact that enjoying the journey. And I was like, I've always heard that, but I'd never really understood the how. And what Steve unpacked there is that's the how of being able to appreciate the journey, is being very clear in terms of why you're doing it, not being seduced and distracted by the achievements, and being able to stay true to why you're doing it, and therefore being grateful when it happens, regardless of size and scale. That's where the enjoyment comes from. And that's my biggest takeaway from this, and remembering why we're doing this in the first place. And for us at Metavolve, it's very much around reducing the trial and error of entrepreneurs building a great, successful business. And, there's just the gratitude now of having this conversation just reinforces that we are doing that. And that's where you see his passion and commitment coming through. And this is exactly something that I deeply relate to. And it breeds confidence, and it breeds this determination to keep doing it. And I think that's just a personal lesson that I'm definitely taking away. And then a final one is just a franchise business model is maybe a bit more complicated than one thinks, but also, again, it's very hard to have control over what your business does in the market, in the industry, if you're going a franchise route. So there's many different ways to think about scaling. And I think there's many more episodes we're going to have around scaling internationally, to hear all the different routes and approaches for the different types of industries and business models. But until then, thank you very much for listening to the Founder Files. If you really enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, the best way that you can support the podcast is just to follow us, subscribe, review, give us a rating, like, comment, share with other people. Just by engaging with the podcast on anywhere that it's distributed is the most effective way to support it. So thank you for listening. I would love to get your feedback, would love to get what lessons you took from this, and also any other questions you'd have for Steve or any other podcast or any other guest around scaling their business, anything else you'd like to know. So thank you once again. See you next time. Cheers.